the last keynote speaker. Here comes the founder, the funder, and the futurist talking about navigating the tech storm, business impact of technologies beyond the hype. That was a long title, but here he is, Mr. Niklas Bergman.
Good afternoon. At least some of you here, some still doing the coffee over there. You're more than welcome to bring the coffee over here if you want. So, well, we got the technology booting up behind me here, and I've walked around the floor here today trying to understand where we are from a more technical perspective, but I still need to get some hands up from you people here just to get a sense of where we are on the scale of technological proficiency, right? So can I just get hands up? Do you still buy books in a physical bookstore? Yeah, you do? Cool. That's good since you sort of work in the physical world. Do you still watch linear TV? Like in a specific time of the day? Few of you still do that. That's cool. Do you have your wearables? Like fitness bands? Quite a few, yeah. Good, interesting. I've had all of them. I had to have that because I had to get one to start exercising. And then that sensation diminishes after a while. I get a new one. I start exercising a bit more. And then that sensation diminishes. And then I have to get a new one. So I've gone through all of them, actually. It's quite useful. But then, of course, this is kind of last year, isn't it? Of course, today we should do the implants. So statistically, there should be a handful of people having implants, like these small NFC chips you have in your banking card or in your commuter card. Any implants? No? Really? I sort of got the impression when I had the briefing that you were a tech-savvy crowd. That didn't really work, right? I have this. I must say I have one of those. It is not that useful. You don't need it, really. It's every time, it's like 1 time out of 10, I can put my hotel key on this. But usually they just try to get me to switch hotel, like last night here in Copenhagen. Because it's still in its infancy. They've been using it for cattle for 20 years, for your dog probably. But for humans, it's not that useful. So don't run away to get one of those. Save it for later. Let me take the blame and the pain for that, because I'm trying to look at new things, trying to understand what they're useful for, and in this specific case, it didn't really work out. So it's all on me there. But when I'm not doing things like this, being on stage, I work with very early stage technology startups, trying to get a sense of technology, looking at an IP portfolio, working with a professor in physics somewhere, and then trying to make business from that specific innovation. So I've been doing that for 25 years, really enjoying that. And it's all about technology, science, how that is driving innovation and business development that I enjoy. And what's fascinating here is that it doesn't really matter if it's the steam engine, if it's electricity, or if it's the computer. All these things get accepted into society in roughly the same way. It's a challenge here because it's not that different from what it used to be. First, we find a new innovation, don't really know how to use it, what to use it for, so we start experimenting. After that, we find a couple of interesting applications, it expands into society, and we start using it more and more in our lives. And then coming to the third step, the third part of this, the transformational part, where we actually build society around this innovation. Like with a car in the 1950s in the US. Suddenly we saw shopping malls, suburbs, we saw drive-in cinemas, all these things that could never exist without the car. Meaning that we build society and it's an essential part of our development. Today we have smartphones, of course. We're really, really there. We could never live without our smartphones as it is today. So that's a third part of a new technology. And for me, trying to work with these things, trying to understand how we can measure the impact, I try to do it myself in a three-way process. First, to analyze what's out there, understand, take things in, all the information in, trying to process it, trying to categorize it in different ways. Then I try to assess and see how it will affect my business or society as a whole. And then in a third step, actually trying to adapt and understand how I could have to change my behavior based on this new innovation. So I'm going to take you through this and try to give you some examples of how this actually works. And it's to start with the analysis part. That's really interesting. And me, in my day job, I meet with scientists, researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, other investors, even politicians sometimes, God forbid. But I meeting with all these people, every once in a while I put together a top 5 list of interesting technologies that people in my bubble are looking for. Investors, entrepreneurs, researchers. So I'm going to run you through this list with you. And number 5, starting out with robots. And it's interesting, robots has been around for, well, more than 100 years in popular culture. We have all different kinds of industrial robots that have been around for at least 50 years in production. We also see now that we get more and more of humanoid-looking robots, robots that can walk like a human. And this is really, really impressive from a technical perspective. The engineering behind this is amazing. Then, of course, when it comes to the communications part of it, it's less so, right? I mean, if you want to sell an interesting thing, an interesting new innovation to an audience, I mean, you don't put on a pair of boots, a uniform, and a gas mask and think that people will be all amazed about this, right? I show this to my kids. My youngest, who was 6 years at the time, she didn't sleep for a week. I mean, that's sort of annoying, and you really need to think about these things when you communicate something new. But of course, there are the cute ones as well. This one, the size of a deer, really, really impressive that it's so stable on this icy parking lot, right? But you can't do like this, can you? This is not nice. This is being quite mean to this cute little creature. And the funny thing is that when they launched this video on YouTube, there were Facebook groups started in defense of the robot. Meaning that we see something here. We start being emotional. We start get feelings for these creatures. And that is something quite new here. Another part of this is that, I mean, this development is quite fast. We see it more and more and more. And robots today can do things they couldn't do just a year or two ago, like moving around, picking up boxes, changing their behavior when their environment is changing. So this is also really, really impressive. Less impressive here maybe, I don't know if you noticed, but the guy with the hockey stick, it's the same guy as in the previous video. Makes you think a bit. I mean, when he comes home from work, what do he tell his kids? What did you do for work, Dad? I was just messing around with robots, right? But these robots, they are kind of impressive. They can do things that most of us can't do in a limited, confined space. On the other hand, they have big challenges in actually performing the most basic tasks in an everyday situation, like picking up the trash or whatever it is. So the development of robotics is really interesting, but we're not really there yet. Another example here is they're called food delivery robots. Quite not there yet either. And what's even more interesting here is that this one is sort of robotic, but actually most of the time controlled by a human in a control center somewhere else. So we still have our challenges, but this field is developing rapidly, and that's why it's so interesting for me and other investors. We continue. Number 4, virtual reality, augmented reality. I'm sure most of you have tried virtual reality in any form over here, among other places. Anyone that did not get motion sickness? Hands up. Some of you? Everyone gets motion sickness. Almost, yeah. No. Some of you really are planning for the future. You're already ahead of us because this is complicated. It is difficult for your senses to really understand what's happening when you're totally immersed. You don't see anything else, you don't hear anything else, and your senses have big problems in understanding what's happening. Like for this guy, he's going on a roller coaster ride in a pair of virtual reality glasses, meaning that his senses cannot understand what's happening. And as far as I know, there's nothing wrong with him. Maybe the t-shirt, but otherwise there's nothing wrong with this guy. It's just a big challenge for his senses to understand, meaning that there are interesting applications in VR, but still a bit challenging. And from the investment community that was just pouring money into this field 4 or 5 years ago, have become a bit reluctant. Maybe the best application I've seen so far is this virtual reality headset for chicken. It's kind of a neat idea, isn't it? I mean, imagine a chicken farm. I don't know, 10,000 chicken in a space smaller than this. Not much quality of life, is it? But what if we give them VR headsets? They think they can, instead of walking inside this confined space, they are roaming the fields or even flying, right? That's a great increase in quality of life, isn't it? Until we chop their head off after 45 days, but that's a different story. But this also adds to another aspect of new technologies, and it's the fact that we need to include creativity, our imagination to try to find the interesting applications. But what if we see through the VR goggles? What if we extend that to augmented reality, mixed reality? We can project interesting, necessary information around us, like in a repair setting like this, or in a gaming environment like this one. And even here, Konica Minolta also have, of course, interesting aspects of this, interesting applications that they are working on. And this is, of course, probably one of the most important ways that we will interact with our information in the future. And this is good. I mean, this is visually good, not too much information. And this is also really important that we try to understand how we can limit this to use it in the best way possible. Because with any technology, any new innovation, it's up to you, the users, to decide how you want to use this technology, to make sure that you remain in the driver's seat. Don't let anyone else decide how you should do this, because then technology can go in any direction that is not really useful for us, right? We continue with number 3, mobility in all its different forms, going from A to B. A lot of things has happened here in the past 5 years. We see that the taxi industry is struggling. We see that we see more and more of car sharing initiatives. New car makers are popping up trying to break into the industry. We see, I don't know, maybe we'll even have jetpacks coming in the near future, which is kind of amazing. I don't know if any of you have tried this, but I think it looks kind of cool at least. We see that we have bike sharing systems, especially in China and in Asia. Really, really good if we can get people to ride a bike and not drive a car for the environment. But a challenge, of course, if that means that people just leave the bikes everywhere and the government has to pick them up and take care of them for scraps. If you live in a large city, you probably have these scooter companies, electrical scooters everywhere. Also an interesting thing, started out in California, as a lot of other things, and also even made its way up to Stockholm in Sweden. Doesn't really work in the winter, I must say. It's a bit of a challenge. It's also a bit of a challenge when you look at it from an environmental perspective, when only 25% or even less of the people that are using these scooters use it instead of a car. Most people use it instead of walking, and that's not like the best idea, right? In Stockholm, there are now, at the moment, 8 scooter companies. There's so many scooter companies that they're starting to run out of colors. And that is a challenge. For me, as a business person trying to find the economic viability of this, I don't really understand how we can put billions and billions of euros into these startups and having 8 companies competing in Stockholm, which has roughly 1 million inhabitants. So there is some kind of bubble here. Short-term things are going to happen. Long-term, this is definitely one way of going from A to B that's going to be here. Another part of mobility, of course, is autonomous driving in all its different forms. And interesting here is that we don't really have it yet, but we've talked about it so much, so we start getting used to the idea. And when we get used to something, it also triggers our imagination. Of course, we can say that taxi drivers, bus drivers, driving schools will not exist in the future. But we also start seeing second-order effects, the ones that are a bit further away from the obvious. And let me just give you two examples of that. The first one is the fact that we're not that good drivers. There's roughly 1.25 million people killed in traffic every year, and more than 1 million of those are killed because of human errors. So what if we get autonomous cars? Isn't that great? Then we're going to save 1 million lives, right? All good. Apart from the fact that we have a lot of people waiting to get a donated organ, meaning that we save 1 million lives in traffic, we lose 1 million lives in the organ donors queue. No one really thought about that when they started pitching this idea of autonomous cars, I think. What's interesting here is that, of course, we can solve this in many different ways. We can 3D print organs soon. We can gene modify cows to have them grow human organs inside them. We can urge people to drive more motorcycles. So any of you driving motorcycles, the rest of us appreciate that because that's a great benefit for society when it comes to organ donors. So continue doing that, please. But interesting here is the second order effects, those things that we didn't really think about when we started using a technology. And with all these autonomous driving things, of course it's amazing, but what if you save 30 minutes to an hour each way back and forth to the office every day? It sort of becomes a responsibility for you to try to use that time in the best way possible. Of course it's up to you, it's your freedom, but it's a big difference if you work or study philosophy, or if you just spend 1 hour playing Candy Crush, right? It's all up to you. I'm not judging, but it's really, really a responsibility to try to use these things in the best way possible. Also, we continue to number 2, the environment, new energy solutions. And I mean, it's a fact that we can't keep doing what we've done so far. Good here is that almost all politicians in the world agree upon this. We have solutions in the working. We have an understanding about this. And at the same time, we see that there's a whole lot of new and interesting energy solutions, sustainable energy solution that is gaining momentum. I mean, solar has been around for 100 years, but now we start seeing that it's cheaper than burning coal in India. It's cheaper than burning gas in the southern parts of the US, meaning that we're seeing a financial incentive to actually using solar. No need for dividends, no need for subsidies from the government. Also, we see that wind is getting there. It's gaining momentum. For example, last year in October, one day in October, there was so much wind produced in Germany that the spot price of energy was 0. We're going to get there again. It's going to happen again, not every day, but we're going to see a situation where more and more of energy needs are going to be fulfilled by sustainable solutions. That said, we also have a growing demand for energy, meaning that sustainable energy is still roughly 14-15% of the total energy production. So that is still a challenge. We will be reliant on fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. Last but not least, number 1, and of course, it's AI, right? AI, this thing that everyone talks about, no one really knows what it is. Everyone thinks that everyone else is doing it, meaning that if you ask a CEO today, of course they do AI. They have a lot of AI projects in their companies, right? And we've come to this situation today because of a number of things that coincides. And one is that we, a bit more than 20 years ago, managed to get computers so fast that we beat the best people in chess. We got databases that are so good so we beat the best humans in Jeopardy. And then combining that with really, really amazing algorithms that are self-learning, meaning we can beat the best humans in Go, this Chinese board game. And then adding some human aspects into the algorithms, like bluff taking, risks, all these things that are very human, meaning that the computers now beat us also in poker. Gaming examples, I know, but it's interesting. It's confined spaces, confined environments, set specific rules, but really, really interesting that we go in this direction. That said, from a venture capital perspective, short term, AI is a big bubble. When looking at this in Europe, roughly 40% of all AI startups in Europe don't have any AI component in their offering, meaning that it's just lipstick on a pig. People are just putting that stamp on to get investors interested, and investors are quite easily fooled, so that works. Long term, we have some amazing opportunities here. AI, machine learning, natural language processing, all different kinds of advanced analytics, big data analytics. Of course, that's some really, really interesting opportunities here. And already today, we start seeing a few of these. We start seeing that take Google, for example. They put a machine learning algorithm in the cooling system of their data centers. And they reduced the energy consumption with 40% in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, they mastered something that the best Google engineers haven't managed for 2 decades. So once you find an interesting application, you can see some tremendous results. Same thing with windmills. They took machine learning and applied it on all the different parts of the value chain in a windmill, from design, manufacturing, to transport, service support, finance, and all that, and improved productivity with roughly 20%. So there are interesting use cases out there, but they're not that easy to find still. There's a lot of talk about it, but we don't really see the effects. Okay, that was the top 5 list. And of course, I don't know, it's very easy just to feel baffled about this and think that, oh, I don't want to be part of it. If I just look the other way, all these new innovations will just disappear. I don't have to care about them, right? But that is not really the fact. It is not. I think the only way to use these things, the only way to approach new innovations is definitely to try to just embrace them. Be curious about these things, be curious and a bit skeptical. Don't let anyone else decide, but be open-minded about it. So that's the first part of analyzing these technologies, but you also need to understand the timing aspect. I'm going to give you 2 examples of this. These are 2 companies that have a few things in common. I think most of you know about them. Skype, the peer-to-peer telephone company, and Spotify, the music streaming giant with 200 million users. They have a few things in common. It both starts with the letter S, founded in Sweden by Swedes, 2003 and 2006. Unfortunately, they have one more thing in common, and this is the fact that I said no to being an early investor in both these companies. Not really my proudest moment as a venture capitalist, especially when the second time they sold Skype, they got $8 billion from Microsoft. When Spotify was listed on the stock exchange last year, it was at a valuation of $26 billion. I don't want to be greedy, but just a small chunk of this would have been quite good for me, I think. But what's interesting and what makes me think about this, and every time I meet, especially with the Spotify founders, of course, they remind me. They make sure to remind me about my mistake. But it's also interesting to see that they managed to get the timing right on all these new technologies. They saw that we were moving from desktop to laptop to mobile devices when listening to music. They saw that we were going from local storage to storage in the cloud, and then using streaming through 3G and 4G networks and Wi-Fi to listen to these things. We saw that they were using data analytics to give us new, interesting playlists to listen to. All these things they saw in 2006, which is really, really impressive, and also good timing and a bit of luck involved in that. So that's a challenge with timing and getting a sense of what's out there. But once you've found interesting applications, interesting technologies, innovation applications, then of course you need to understand how they will affect you. How will these things affect your industry? How will your competition react? How will it affect your customers? Can you customize your offerings, products or services in another way? You can offer new things to your users based on this new innovation. Maybe you have power users that are extremely tech savvy. They might demand new things from you based on this new innovation, right? And then, of course, the third part of this is see how your organization works. I mean, with the future of workspace, can you see new ways of be more efficient, more productive, new ways of organizing work based on using a new innovation? Of course, that's the opportunity here. So that's when you try to assess how this will affect the different parts of your industry, your business, your company, your customers, etc. The third part here is to adapt to that new reality. You have to understand that this will change your leadership. Of course, you have to lead people now that everyone has smartphones. It's a totally different way than when you had all the people in the office from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Now people are mobile, moving around in lots of different ways, meaning that leadership has to evolve side by side with new innovations. Another part of this is that we need to assess, understand, and adapt to a new ethical landscape, the ethics of innovation, technology, and business. We need to understand how sustainability is working, because this is a prerequisite. It's not that you can opt in or opt out, and that is very, very clear today. Also, of course, you need to understand how you can deal with uncertainty in all its different forms. To make decisions in an uncertain environment, try to understand how that can affect you, try to realize and be content in the fact that uncertainty is a new normal, and there will never be a situation again where I can have all the information needed to make a good judgment or a good decision. And that has a lot to do with our mindset around information. The last part of this in adapting is, of course, you need to look at your strategy. You need to look at your business models. One of the most interesting things about new innovations from a business perspective is that it actually changes and attacks and challenges existing business models. I mean, we've seen that numerous times in the past. We're seeing it now as we speak. And just to give you, again, the example of Spotify. What's interesting here is that I told you about the fact that Spotify get all these things right when it comes to the timing of these new technologies. But they also use technology to actually be able to, actually be able to provide a new way of paying for your content. I mean, we don't buy music anymore. We buy a subscription to music service. And that is something that was impossible without the use of all these new technologies. So that's the adapt part. And just to summarize again then, you need to analyze what's out there. You need to be curious. You need to be a bit skeptical, because it has to be on your terms. But take it in, absorb it, be open-minded, but make decisions based on your needs and preferences. Then, of course, understand how that will affect your company, your industry, your customers, and all that. And the last part, adapt to this. New ways of leadership, sustainability, dealing with uncertainty, and making sure that your business model and strategy are aligned with these new technologies. So that's the basics of how I try to look at new innovations when I work with my startups and my investments. It can, of course, differ from case to case and from industry to industry. Some of them are a lot faster than others. But in essence, this is the things, the mindset, the framework I'm trying to keep in the back of my head to get an understanding of this. So, 30. That's the number of billion euros that Alibaba had as a turnover on Singles Day, one day, 11th of November last year. 30 billion euros, 11,000 orders per second. 5,000. That's how old Aubrey de Grey thinks we're going to be. And don't get mistaken by the beard. He's one of the smartest persons I've met. And interesting here is that when someone asks him about his research in longevity and aging, and asking how old can we be, he just say 5,000 to get rid of the discussion. Because he truly thinks that we will solve the challenge of aging within a decade or two. 3,236, that's the number of satellites that Amazon wants to send up in space to cover the whole world in fast broadband. And 215, that's the number of million gigabytes that we can fit into 1 gram of DNA. That's definitely the storage medium of the future. Not in your laptops or smartphones today, but we'll get there. 8, that's the number of people that were accepting a seat on the Google's ethics board in end of March this year. 0, that was the number of people that were still on the ethics board of Google in April. A bit of a challenge here. I think it's amazing that Google sees the need of an ethics board, but also a challenge to have people with different opinions being in the same room at the same time, as polarized as we are today. So with that, I thank you. I'm sure you're a bit confused after my 30 minutes here, but I do hope that you're a bit curious about where we're heading, about technology, innovation, and how that could affect your businesses in all these different ways. I also do hope that you're optimistic, that you see the opportunities, but I really do think that as long as you're open-minded and take these things in, there are a whole lot of interesting ways of using new innovations to improve your business in many different ways. So with that, I thank you. May the future be with you. I'm sure it will for the rest of this session. I think you have some amazing, interesting things to look forward to tonight, among other things. So with that, thank you, and I'd love to continue the discussion. I'll be around here for the next of the day. We'll also be on the panel later this afternoon. If you want to get in touch with me or download things or sign up to a newsletter, please do it on at least some of these social networks. So with that, I thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Niklas Bergman. Now, I don't want to rub it in when you said you should have invested in Skype and, and Spotify, but...
it's been rubbed in, I can tell you that.
But dare I ask you, if you look at it now from your perspective, if you're going to invest now, is there a certain innovation or invention that you are focusing on now?
I think, as I sort of said, I think AI is really interesting. The challenge of investing in AI right now is that all the valuations are totally inflated, meaning that you don't get what you pay for. So I think that will stabilize and we'll find some good leveling there, but given the right valuations, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in AI. 2 other fields that are less on the radar today is quantum computing, applications in quantum, still very early, but also nanotechnology, new materials in all these different forms. There's those 3 areas that where I look a lot, actually.
Okay. We'll be seeing you again here on the main stage
Yes.
at 4 o'clock, where we do a summary. We have a panel discussion on the market trends. So see you all at 4 o'clock. Mr. Niklas Bergman.
Thank you.